Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Temple City Council for Thursday, July the 3rd. If you'll please rise, I'll lead us in an invocation this evening, and then Mr. Scott Allen, the chair of our Parks and Leisure Services Advisory Board, will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Join me in prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for all the great things that you provide to our community. Thank you for the opportunity to live in this great nation in which we celebrate the birth of our independence as a nation 232 years ago. Father, help us to remember as we celebrate this weekend that many people have sacrificed their lives, their time to make this nation the great nation that it is. Help us to be contributors to that effort as this nation continues to grow and become even greater. Father, be with us on this council as we do the business of our city. Help it to be pleasing in your eyes. May all the things that we do be pleasing to you, and we ask for these blessings. In Christ's name, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Don't go away, Scott. Next item on our agenda is a presentation. And Mr. Scott Allen is the chair of Parks and Leisure Services. I'd like to invite Mr. Ken Secura to come up as well. We have a proclamation and a recognition tonight for Parks and Leisure Services. Great. And staff, please come on up. Absolutely. Chuck Graham, Val Roman, Dieter Burns. We celebrate our Parks and Recreation this weekend, certainly, with all the activities going on around the 4th of July, but also this is an opportunity to recognize Parks and Recreation Month. And the Park Services in Temple are just doing a wonderful job. Parks are beautiful. I recently did the Keep Temple Beautiful litter survey, and I was telling Ken Secura the other day that of all the areas that we surveyed on the litter, I was proud to say that our parks as a whole stood out as very, very clean and very attractive. And that really gives me a great sense of pride to know that our city has that type of parks facility. And it's so important to the quality of life of the citizens. So thank you for that, and thanks to the staff and all those of you and your folks that work every day to make that happen. Let me present this proclamation, and I'll let the chair and Ken talk a little bit about parks. Whereas Parks and Recreation systems are dedicated to enhancing the quality of life for millions of residents in communities around the world through recreation programming, leisure activities, and conservation efforts. Whereas parks, recreation activities, and leisure experiences provide opportunities for young people to live, grow, and develop into contributing members of society, create lifelines and continuous life experiences for older members of the community, generate opportunities for people to come together and experience a sense of community, and pay dividends to communities by attracting business and jobs and increasing housing values. Whereas, as we observe Parks and Recreation Month, we recognize the vital contributions of employees and volunteers in parks and recreation facilities. These dedicated supporters keep parks clean and safe for visitors, organize youth activities, provide educational programming on health, nutrition, first aid and gardening, advocate for more open space and better trails, and fundraise for local improvements. And whereas we recognize the importance of our parks and recreation facilities and desire to learn more about how to support the places that bring our community a higher quality of life, safer places to play, and healthy alternatives through recreation programming for everyone. And now therefore I, William A. Jones III, Mayor of the City of Temple, Texas, do hereby proclaim July of 2008 as Parks and Recreation Month in the City of Temple. And I encourage all citizens to celebrate the month of July by participating in their choice of pleasurable activities, to find refreshment from their leisure by utilizing the programs and activities of the Temple Parks and Leisure Services Department. I further urge all citizens to express appreciation to the City Parks and Leisure Services Department for the outstanding job that they perform for all of us. In testimony whereof, I witness my hand and the seal of the City of Temple, Texas, of this 3rd day of July of 2008. Let me present this to the chair, and at the same time ask him to express our appreciation to the Parks Board, which is a very active board in our community and contributes greatly to the quality of life of this city. Thank you very much, Scott.
Thank you. And on behalf of the Parks staff, the Parks Department, and the citizens of Temple, we thank you for proclaiming the month of July as National Parks and Recreation Month here in the city of Temple. I want everybody to know that the staff has done a wonderful job preparing a full calendar of events for every day in the month of July, for providing opportunities for our citizens to get out and enjoy some of our wonderful facilities. These include things like golf, tennis, horseshoes, and numerous other events. But most importantly, I think the staff wants to invite everybody to come out tomorrow to Miller Park to enjoy the celebration of Independence Day and stick around and watch the wonderful fireworks display in the evening. But most of all, we want you all to come out and play.
Thanks.
I'll just echo what Scott said, and I'd also like to thank first, I think since we had this proclamation last year, the community for their support and the bond issue, and the City Council, and most importantly the volunteers like our Parks Board for all they do. We do have a full schedule of activities. It's been, I think, in the newspaper, and we're going to send out a lot more news on it, and there's something every day in July, and we want people to come out and experience their parks and celebrate their parks. Thank you.
And Tuesday night, we get to recognize a very important component of our park system. That's our volunteers.
Yes, we'll be recognizing all the volunteers, I think about 150 of them that worked over, I think, about 12,000 hours last year to help us out, and that's those dollars saved that help make our parks a better park system for it, and we'll be at the CAC to do that.
Good. Thank you, Ken. Next on our agenda would be public comment. Citizens who desire to address the council on an item may sign up to do so prior to the meeting. Public comments are received during this portion of the meeting, and we limit the comments to 3 minutes. No discussion or final action can be taken by the council on these items that are brought up by the citizens. Tonight we had no one sign up to speak, so we'll move on to the next part of our agenda. Item 4 is on bond items. It is the first and a final reading in a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing the issuance of $13,975,000 City of Temple, Texas combination tax and revenue certificates of obligation, Series 2008A, authorizing the levy of an ad valorem tax and the pledge of certain revenues in support of the certificates, approving an official statement, a paying agent, register agreement, purchase contract, and other agreements related to the sale and issuance of the certificates, establishing procedures for selling and delivering the bonds, and authorizing other matters related to the issuance of the certificates to be considered on an emergency basis. Ms. Bernard, do you want to take these one at a time, or do you want me to go through all of them and then you can present, and when Ms. Colombo or Mr. Wegmiller come up, they can address all?
Prefer to take them all at once.
All right, then let me just read these 3 in. All 3 of these items are first and final readings and require public hearings. The next item is to consider adopting an ordinance authorizing the issuance of $9,750,000 City of Temple, Texas general obligation bonds, Series 2008, authorizing the levy of an ad valorem tax in support of the bonds, approving a paying agent, register agreement, an official statement, a purchase agreement, and other agreements related to the sale and issuance of the bonds, establishing procedures for selling and delivering the bonds, and authorizing other matters relating to the issuance of the bonds to be considered on an emergency basis. And the third item under bonds will be the first and final reading in a public hearing to consider authorizing the second supplemental ordinance to the master ordinance establishing the City of Temple, Texas Utility System Revenue Financing Program related to the issuance of $15,425,000 in City of Temple, Texas Utility Revenue Bonds, System Revenue Bonds, Series 2008, and the establishment of procedures for selling and delivering the bonds to be considered on an emergency basis. Ms. Bernard.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. Tonight is a different approach. Typically, when we brought the bonds to you at this point, it's to asking for council to award a sale tonight we're, based on several factors that Mr. Wegmiller and Ms. Palumbo will go over, we're asking for authorization and within basic parameters to sell bonds. And I want to go through each bond item, what the source of the funds will be, what they'll be used on, and the source of repayment. And then I'll turn it over to Mr. Wegmiller and Ms. Palumbo to go over the details of the transaction and what we're asking for authorization for. As you just stated, Mayor, there's 3 separate bond issues. The first one, the $13,975,000, is a combination tax and revenue certificate of obligation. The $9,750,000 is a GO, or general obligation bonds, for park improvements that was voter approved in the fall of 2007. And then the third issue is a revenues, utility system, water, wastewater revenue bond that we refer to as revenue bonds. What each issue will be used for, the proceeds, the certificate of obligation bonds, $13,975,000, $9.6 million of it is for streets, $913 facility maintenance, and I won't go down the whole list, but and then the end of the list is bond issue cost that's estimated at $440,000. Next is the GO bonds. Again, those were the parks bonds that were approved by voters in November. There's various park projects that those were approved and being issued for. And the next slide, utility revenue bonds. We have the projects listed in descending order. Close to $5 million for West Temple water and wastewater extensions, north of FM 2305. Several items related to upgrades of our water treatment plant, and then miscellaneous water wastewater projects. Fiscal impact or source of repayment for each one of those bonds. The COs, the repayment of those were included in the adopted tax rate for this current fiscal year. As you recall, we had opportunity to issue close to $22 million worth of bonds with little or no impact on the tax rate, and the repayment of those is included in the current adopted tax rate. The GOs that were voter approved, that is programmed for FY 2009, be about 1 cent on the tax rate. And then the water wastewater revenue bonds, the rates that are in place today and that was approved with the FY 2008 budget include the repayment of those bonds. Next, again, to turn it up, go through the details of the transaction, including we just add ratings on each one of these bonds. We'll turn it over to Dan Wegmiller, and he'll walk you through that.
Thank you, Mr. Conklin.
Great, thank you, Mayor, council members. I'm Dan Wegmiller with First Southwest Company. We appreciate the opportunity to come here and present to you tonight. First, I want to go through the ratings. I've left in front of you the 4 different handouts that they provide back to us, but what I'll do is just read over the high points, and then at your leisure you can dig into the reports. But again, as some background, rating agencies are great feedback for you, but the primary purpose, first and foremost, for them is to give an investor who's going to buy your obligations a sense of the risks associated with your debt, or lack of risk in a good way when they go to buy your debt. So it's really a market purpose to give anyone, anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world that wants to buy Temple debt a sense of what kind of credit quality you are. And so with that, I'll start with Moody's. They have the little blue M up in the corner, and I'll be referring to the GO and certificate report. This is based on your tax base. What they note in this report is that they have affirmed the AA3 bond rating that they had previously assigned to the city. They note that the high-quality rating reflects moderate expansion of the city's tax base, prudent financial management, bolstered by ample reserves, and a manageable debt position. I want to stress the word in there, or the phrase high quality. That AA3, that AA category, especially at Moody's, is a very kind of sacred place to fall into. And getting into that category means you have done over a extended amount of time good, consistent management, financial practices, and had solid economic growth in the area. They also cite on page 2 of the report that the city has a history of strong, deliberate financial management. A key component to the city's AA3 rating is a historically well-maintained financial position and use of conservative budgeting practices to preserve ample general fund reserves. They note that the debt burden that you have currently and that you're projected to have is manageable in their eyes. And again, in this volatile market that we've seen pretty much all the major bond insurers except for one fall away and have very little market value. In fact, you all are rated above pretty much all of them that are out there that have been downgraded over the years. So the strength of this rating is even more meaningful today to be in that AA category. The next one I'll go to is Standard & Poor's. In the top middle box, it'll refer to combination tax and revenue. This is also a reflection of your tax debt. And here, congratulations are in order because you were at AA minus, which is equal to the AA3 rating at Moody's, but Standard & Poor's found it necessary to move you up to the next level, which is a straight AA rating. They note here that moving the existing general obligation debt to AA from AA minus is due to the city's continued economic expansion, historically strong reserves. They also note that the role as a major regional market in Central Texas between Dallas and Austin and a diversifying regional economy is part of that reason for the upgrade. And then they also note moderate overall debt levels is their assessment. The other thing I want to note in this report comes on page 2, the middle of the page, is that Temple's management practices are considered strong under Standard & Poor's financial management assessment methodology, indicating practices are strong, well embedded, and likely sustainable. This is a new category they added a couple years ago, and you're one of very few that they have given that strong category to. You've got to be hitting on all cylinders to be at that level. And so, again, congratulations on that. They also note that there's a belief that management will sustain its strong general fund reserves and maintain its manageable overall net debt burden due to their policy of transferring surplus revenue into the capital projects fund. Finally, also noted in here is that despite national trends, Temple continues to see its economy expand. That's important, and I'll touch on that issue here in a minute as well. Again, just on this best practices, this strong rating, I think it's important to note here that they state that among the highlights of the city's management techniques is the Finance Department's monthly monitoring and reporting to the current fund budget, reporting of the current fund budget to ensure compliance and allow corrective actions to be taken to guarantee balance to the council. Coupled with conservative revenue and expenditure assumptions, management publishes formal financial reports quarterly. Again, these are very strong comments, and in this market sector today, investors and underwriters are reading much further than they used to. They got complacent from the standpoint that you always had bond insurance on top of these deals, and they relied heavily on that. What we're seeing now is we're seeing it, and we're pushing investors and underwriters to really dig in. And when you get to these rating levels, what we're encouraging the underwriters when they go out to price is to look at selling this debt to investors without insurance, seeing if they can really find investors that will look through and see the quality of the underlying credit. And so hopefully that is something that we're going to see over this issue, hopefully, but certainly in the future. I think it's going to be where we see investors go, is not paying for that enhancement when they have a strong rating. With that, I'll move to the utility ratings. Again, I'll start with Moody's. Moody's on the utility bond rating affirms the A1 rating that they had. They typically hold utility ratings back a little lower than the tax-backed ratings from the bottom line, from the base standpoint that you cannot force someone to turn on the water faucet. So water usage in their minds is somewhat more limited than your ability to levy a tax. But what they do reflect here is a history of strong financial management, including the implementation of regular rate increases, a moderate debt ratio, and sound debt service coverage levels. Strong financial management continues to be a consideration in the city's rating, marked by implementation of regular rate increases. Moody's believes management has taken the appropriate action to ensure maintenance of coverage levels that are consistent with this rating category and anticipates that this commitment will continue going forward. One thing I want to note that Moody's made the comment once again in the meeting, the rating presentations that we had in Dallas went very well, and obviously the ratings show that, but they also complimented the presentation that you all put forth. The information they said that you all put together as a city and present to them is some of the most comprehensive and best targeted information. It's one thing to provide a book of information, it's another thing to really target in on what they look at and they value. And so they complimented that. They really enjoyed and appreciated because the information that you all and the staff put together really zeroed in and makes their job more efficient, and they noted that. So again, congratulations to the presentation that you had. Standard & Poor's on the utility rating, more good news there. They had you at a AA-. They upgraded that rating to straight AA. In their minds, different than Moody's, a strong utility can be every bit as strong credit-wise as a strong tax rating. And in their report, they note that the city's historical solid coverage levels, willingness to increase rates, and ample water supply and treatment capacity are some of the reasons for the upgrade. They also note that the stable and diversified service area economy, consistently strong financial performance and coverage, strong system liquidity, and competitive utility rates are other factors contributing to this rating. With that, that pretty much summarizes the ratings. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have on that, or go into the delegation ordinances.
Question.
Right, thank you. The new method that we're bringing to you today is really a result of some of the market factors that we've been experiencing lately. The delegation ordinance, as opposed to, as Tracy mentioned earlier, we would typically come in today with sale results in hand, and the underwriters bidding on it would wait for your action tonight, and then they'd write tickets to those investors that committed to buy the next business day. And in a normal market, even some volatile markets, they're willing to hold that pricing over. One of the things that has been in existence for quite a while is called delegation or parameters ordinances, where you designate a set of parameters, which Carol Palumbo will go over in a minute, that bracket where you can sell your debt. What it does then is it sets in motion that we can go price on a future day, and on that future day, once the underwriters go out, market the bonds in the morning, and come back with a firm bid to underwrite, instead of waiting till the next council meeting or waiting till the next morning after the council meeting to get the award, you can delegate to staff those parameters, and as long as we fit within those, then at that moment they submit their bid to underwrite. The underwriters, the staff can go over it with us, we can make our recommendation, and then they can approve the financing. Immediately we can call the underwriter and say the city's committed to the financing, and they immediately write tickets. Why that makes a difference today is that the investor community is really not as committed as they used to be in some ways, and the one way is if the market shifts between the pricing level until the day after the council meeting, they could have investors walk away and leave them at risk to the bonds that they've priced. And so what this does is really give more immediate pricing opportunity to the underwriters. And the other reason it's valuable is in this market, underwriters are less willing to just take bonds into their inventory and hope to sell it out over the next couple of days, because we've seen the market move tremendously over a day's time. So this is something that we saw originally with few large issuers had the ability to do, and it was kind of focused on refinancing opportunities, because with refinancings, you're market sensitive, and if it didn't work today, we didn't want to wait till the next council meeting to come back and try to get the deal done. As with most legislation that's passed and authority granted, it was very narrow. We've seen over the past few years it expand out to more cities for refundings and now for new money, because of the recognition that pricing a bond issue, it doesn't matter if it's for refinancing or new projects, pricing is important to get the best rates available. So that's really where this market in this last few weeks have put us at coming back to you and recommending that we use these delegation ordinances and set the parameters in place, and then we will work next week, Tuesday, to price a transaction and firm everything up. We will need Tracy and David available roughly Tuesday between the hours of 12 and 2 to be readily available to go over the financing terms, the bid that's presented. But upon that, we can get a much more aggressive bid potentially in this market. And as a market issue, I just wanted to point out, with job loss numbers that came out today nationally, which again, that's one of the things that the rating agency is some of the national figures that are going on. To get the presentation they did from you all and seeing the strength of your economy, it really bodes well for you. And from an interest rate standpoint, pricing next week instead of yesterday, today we saw short bond market yields fall as expectations for multiple near-term rate hikes dissipate. A lot of people had built in, the market had built in that the Fed would start raising rates earlier. With these job loss figures today nationally, the market reacted today by actually seeing short yields come down, which is obviously beneficial to the pricing of your bonds next week. So we hope market stays strong for us and go out and price next week. I'll be glad to answer any questions you have on this part, or turn it over to Carol.
Thank you, Dan. Council questions, comments, anything from staff? No. Thank you, Ms. Wagner. I appreciate it. Ms. Palumbo.
Good evening.
Welcome.
Mayor, members of the council, I'm Carol Palumbo with McCall, Parkhurst, and Horton, and we're serving as bond counsel to the city on these three issues. As I think staff and Dan have mentioned, these ordinances are structured a little differently, so I wanted to go through each one and the parameters for sale on each one. I guess I'll make general comments first, which is other than what we're going to discuss on the delegation parameters, the ordinances are substantially similar to other ordinances you've passed to issue debt in the past. And on the tax debt, the CO and the GO, obviously it contains the provisions that you agree year to year to set a rate sufficient to pay the principal and interest on the COs and GOs respectively. On the utility debt, the council is agreeing to set water, wastewater rates sufficient to pay the debt. And we're also authorizing the operative agreements, the purchase agreement with the underwriters, the paying agent or registrar agreement with the bank that will make the debt payments to your bondholders, and finalizing the official statement, which is the offering document. Aside from that, as Dan mentioned, over several legislative sessions, the legislature has changed the statute to allow certain types of issuers to be able to delegate pricing, because the best market doesn't always occur on a city council meeting date. So with that in mind, it started out with, really large, Harris County, City, Houston, very large issuers, and over time has been narrowed down to allow for cities with a population of 50,000, and sometime it was only for revenues, and now they opened it up to new money, as he mentioned, and for tax debt, which was one of the biggest that we could not do in the past. So this is a kind of a tool you have in your toolbox for the very market that we have today, as Dan mentioned, that's volatile. So let's go through on each one. Some of the parameters are the same, but I want to go through on each. Basically, your city manager and director of finance have been delegated to be the pricing officers, if you will. So they will be the ones who will be authorized to actually sign the purchase agreement with the underwriters, and then we'll have a certificate that we call a pricing certificate that will actually spell out the interest rate for the bonds, the redemption date for the bonds, the pricing terms that we normally have when we come to the council and price, the day before, the day of the council meetings. So on the general obligation bonds, the specific parameters in which they would be authorized on your behalf to sell the bonds would be that the principal amount of the bonds not exceed the $9,750,000, that the maturity date on the bonds not exceed August 1, 2030, that the price of the bonds be not less than 95% of the principal amount of the bonds, that the underwriter's discount, the compensation of the underwriters to sell, not be more than 1.25% of the principal amount of the bonds, that the interest rate would be the lesser of 77% or the maximum rate allowed by law. And let me say, with all of this, obviously your staff is going to, in conjunction with First Southwest, make sure you get the most cost-effective interest rate you can for this debt given the market. But these are kind of parameters with which they have the authority to determine to proceed as long as we meet within these. So I don't think anybody expects the interest rate to be 7%, but that is a parameter that they have that, if market conditions were such that it would give them that latitude. I don't think anybody's expected that at this point. This delegation is only valid through December 3rd, 2008. I know we're expecting to be able to strike in the market next week, but let's say the market was off next week, we had to delay a little bit. If we had some flexibility with project cost, maybe it would make sense. But for state law reasons, we put a deadline on this. So you can have some comfort that this is not an open-ended delegation. It does, if the bonds are not sold by December 3rd, 2008, we would have to come back to the council for a new authorization to either you would set the price of the bonds or new delegation terms. On the COs, the terms are basically the same, with the exception that the principal amount is not to exceed $13,975,000, and the utility is the $15,425,000. They all three have the same not to exceed on the maturity of the August 1, 2030, not to exceed on the price, the underwriter's discount, and the interest rate. And one of the requirements under state law to be able to delegate is that the obligations have a rating in one of the 4 highest rating categories. So it's clearly based on your current rating, we qualify under that. So this option is not available for, let's say, private placements because there's not a rating in effect. So those are the basic parameters under which you would be authorizing both the city manager and director of finance to proceed on your behalf to sign the necessary purchase agreement, pricing certificates for each respective transaction. So I'm happy to, I know we explained a lot there, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about the ordinances in general or specifically related to the delegation.
Questions from anyone? Well, thank you very much. And I assume you guys will stick around for just a few minutes in case during the public hearing we get questions from citizens here. May call on us to have to ask you some more. All right. Council or staff, anything that you have about these issues prior to going to public hearing?
Here, I would like to ask Mr. Webb-Miller if he could just, what are the interest rates in today's markets for each issue?
Absolutely. For each issue, we're looking at 5% or under right now for all those issues, for all 3 issues. We anticipate the utility issue, even though it has slightly lower rating, to most likely have insurance. The other tax issues should not, but with that insurance, it would put it up to all in the under 5% range.
Thank you.
And just to go on that note, I think staff, and I can tell you, we would feel comfortable if we got too far out of today's market, that we would most likely want to come back and revisit this before we hit some of those parameters that were laid out.
Dan.
Anything else? Okay. If there are no comments or questions from staff or council, these three items require a public hearing. I'll remind you very quickly, the three items are a $13,975,000 certificate of obligation, a $9,750,000 general obligation bond, and then the $15,425,000 Texas Utility System revenue bond. And so, that being said, I'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to speak to the council on any of these three items specifically or individually, please come forward and state your name and address for the record prior to making your comments or asking any questions. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. These are first and final readings, and we are posted for action and expected to take action on these items. Council, your pleasure individually or collectively.
I move to approve all three bond propositions.
That motion, is there a second?
Second it.
That motion is second. Is there further discussion from the council? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Linden?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Thank you very much. Ms. Wagner and Ms. Plumbo, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it. And good luck next Tuesday. We look forward to hearing the results. Our next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. All items listed under this section, consent agenda, are considered to be routine by the City Council and may be enacted by one motion. If discussion is desired by the council, any item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any council member, and it will be considered separately. Today, we have items 7A through J. Council, any items that you wish to have removed for individual consideration or question? If not, I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda, items 7A through J.
I move we approve consent agenda items 7A through J.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
A motion is second. If there's no further question or discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Linden?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye.
Item 8A, first reading and a public hearing. Item 8, and then two items, 8A and 8B. Consider adopting an amendment to the ordinance 2005-4006, abandoning the following street rights-of-way for the United Methodist Church and retaining blanket utility easements for the abandoned rights-of-way to protect existing utilities. And the first part is a portion of North 2nd Street near its intersection with Calhoun Avenue, the original Town, Volume 36, page 640, and the Moore's First Edition, Volume 115, page 416. And the other portion, B, is a portion of East Barton Avenue, south of Main Street, and north of the portion previously abandoned, the original Town, Volume 36, page 640, and Moore's Edition, Volume 115, page 416. Mr. Nolan.
Mayor and City Council, this is the public hearing this evening, and it provided that it's approved on the first reading. Your second reading will be at your next one, July 17th. This is a continuation of the request that had been looked at previously in 2005, and this shows the area highlighted in yellow for the portion of the right-of-ways to be abandoned. And it's essentially that there are some easements that and utility lines that exist in there. And I know that the applicant is present this evening to be able to answer any questions that the council may have. But this is a public hearing, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council has.
Thank you, Mr. Nolan. Council, comments or questions? Being none, this item requires public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak to the council on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Mayor Jones, council members, my name is Christina McNeil, and I live at 2701 Valley Forge in Temple. This matter came up before several years ago, and I don't recall whether it came to the council meeting or not, but I do remember that you had Monday with the mayor then, and another gentleman said if you close these streets, there's 49 other churches you might want their streets closed. I am very aware at the present time that there are quite a few churches that have overburdened traffic on their streets that may be before you asking for this to close. Also, the access to the north from Adams Avenue, you only have 3rd Street, Main Street, and 4th Street, which goes by that church. And 1st Street is very limited, all the way from Central Avenue to French. With the anticipated growth in downtown Temple, this could create a big problem. And therefore, I request that it not be granted. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McNeil. Anyone else wish to speak to the council on this side? Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, any comments, questions, or action on this item?
Motion to approve.
And motion for approval, is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second for approval of item 8A and 8B relating to the closure of the streets as indicated. Is there further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Genders?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Lehman?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 9 is a first reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance repealing and replacing Chapter 13, Flood Damage Prevention, of the City Code of Ordinances to be consistent with updated language, complying with Federal Emergency Management Agency requirements and the City of Temple drainage criteria. Mr. Newman.
Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and members of the dais. Each of you should have at the seat a copy of the handout. It's a 2-page black and white copy, 2 slides per page. Want to cover this flood damage prevention ordinance and the repeal of it and then the replacement of it. And basically we want to go over some definitions, a little bit of history, take a look at the Temple rainfall intensities here, and then what are the benefits of the National Flood Insurance Program, what's in effect if we fail to comply or communities fail to comply, and then the major changes of this ordinance versus the prior one, previous one, and then staff recommendations at the end. A couple of significant definitions. Flood means that it's a temporary condition of partial or complete inundation of normally dry areas or dry lands from runoff of surface waters from any source. Thinking of FEMA's perspective, they're considering not only the rainfall intensities that we may encounter here in Temple, but also if Lake Belton Dam broke, what would be the inundation downstream along the Leon River. So they've mapped these areas in what they call flood insurance rate maps, and those are used for setting insurance rates based on risk. The National Flood Insurance Program was enacted in 1969, and basically for those participating communities that are in the program, the FEMA in turn will provide insurance to those communities through the national program. The next section on floodplain again means any area that or land that can be susceptible to being inundated by water from any source.
You said provide, you mean make available?
Make available through the national.
purchased.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe that wasn't the right choice of
No,
word.
I just wanted to make sure I understood.
Right, making that available. So the flood insurance rate maps indicate those areas that are inundated from what is considered a 100-year storm event, or another way to define that is a 1% chance of that event occurring in a given year. And so the history of the Temple's flood damage prevention ordinance going back to 1987 was the last time it was ever really acted on, from what we can tell from the records. There hasn't been any revisions to date since that time. FEMA considers flood damage prevention ordinances that are over 3 years old to be either non-compliant or out of date. A couple years ago, a new initiative was taken with Bell County, and that's to update all the flood insurance rate maps in the county, and all the communities in the county were required to participate in that effort. Some communities, such as another Bell County community, paid for additional studies. Temple did not. So basically, our floodplains are the same in previous years as this new effort. And so anyway, whatever that's worth.
So does that mean they did not look at them?
No, well, yes. For them to look at them in more detail, we required that we had paid for additional studies. Aside, the Drainage Master Plan is also looking at those same floodplains and the maps that were generated from them. And it appears that they did base them on future land development uses. So actually, I have fairly high level of confidence in the floodplain maps as they stand today, and will be adopted through this effort. But a couple of years ago, Bell County was required to, and its communities within, to participate in updating those maps. And basically, the national program was going through what was called a map modernization, and they want to take the maps that were on paper and digitize them, so they now call them digitized flood insurance rate maps, or DFIRMs. And that's the effort that began a couple of years ago. As part of that process, there was a couple of appeal periods and public notifications that occurred last year. No appeals were received, so therefore the maps would be adopted as they stand. And then this March, we received what FEMA sends out, and it's called the Letter of Final Map Determination. And basically, it gives all the communities in Bell County a 6-month window to adopt their new ordinances concurrent and in the same manner as the model ordinance that FEMA recommends and requires, actually, for those communities. So that's the date at which we're trying to work towards, is the September 26, 2008 date, to have a new ordinance adopted. It takes a little time, even though if council approves this tonight, considers and approves it tonight, for us to get that ordinance signed, sealed, delivered to FEMA, for them to then enter into the, I want to get this right, Congressional Federal Registry. Close enough. Code of Thank you. Code of Federal Regulations. I never can get that right. CFR. So basically, it has to be not only enacted here, but then a copy of it needs to go into the records through Congress.
So are we being out of compliance right now? Does that mean our folks cannot get, if there's any floodplain, are we not able?
We're not out of compliance. In fact, part of my certification is a floodplain manager. So there are already laws that as a CFM, Certified Floodplain Manager, I have to follow, and basically those are federal laws. It just helps to get the local law caught up with the federal law so that it's all consistent. If we don't update this 1987 ordinance to 2008 model ordinance that FEMA recommends, then we would become a non-participating community, and I have that on a couple other slides. Next slide, basically, and we've gone through this through some of the Drainage Master Plan meetings with each of the council member districts, but basically in Temple, we could experience a 100-year storm event, 1% chance a given year. That would be about 11 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. Pretty significant amount of water, and there's some history of a couple of storm events back in 1921, and then as recent as 2001, they were very close to those. So what are the benefits? Well, basically, to remain a participating community in this flood insurance program, the local body needs to adopt the floodplain management regulations, and in turn, the federal government provides flood insurance through the NFIP program, makes available. And then the flood insurance under this program, if the communities do not participate, then that leaves it up to the individuals to go to a private insurance provider. And an example would be Lloyd's of London, which would be very, very expensive in comparison to the rates that the National Flood Insurance Program affords individuals. So what if we fail to comply? Well, this is the catch that FEMA has placed on all the communities that are doing this map modernization, and particularly here in Bell County. If we don't change the ordinance and update it, then we may be placed on what's called probation, and that is basically putting a $50 charge on everyone's premium that has currently carries that insurance. If that doesn't get the attention of the community and decision makers, then the community might be placed on what's called suspension, in which any renewals of insurance policies would go away. They just wouldn't renew them anymore. And more importantly, in light of what's going on in the Midwest United States, any presidential declarations for financial assistance for flooding is forfeited by those communities that don't make the change. So basically, the FEMA's goal is to have governments adopt and enforce their floodplain management regulations in order to reduce the risk of and claims of incidences. Well, some of the major changes are that from the prior ordinances that we now have a enforcement provision, and that includes a $400 fine per violation per occurrence. And there's some other enhancements to the definitions in the new ordinance. That's just language that's updated. The new maps will be referencing the effective date, which will be September 26, 2008, if we continue forward being a participating community. And then there's some, to answer your question, we already have in the national requirements these last three bullets, and basically we're just trying to catch up the current ordinance with the national requirements. And I can enumerate those if you like. But in summary, we're requesting that we repeal the 1987 flood damage prevention ordinance and adopt a new the 2008 ordinance in order to remain a participating community in the National Flood Insurance Program. And that would also include amending a requirement to elevate structures to 1 foot above that 100-year or 1% chance storm event, which is also known as a base flood elevation. This is already in our drainage criteria manual. We're just making that consistent, so it's relatively a cleanup of the ordinance. Before I read the final recommendation, I do want to say that the Planning and Zoning Commission heard this and recommended it 7-0 a couple of weeks ago, and then also we had the opportunity, staff had the opportunity to go talk to the Temple Area Builders Association, go through their work with their Government Affairs Committee, and they gave us a letter of support for the recommendation, which is to repeal and replace Chapter 13 Flood Damage Prevention Ordinance, consistent with updated ordinance language complying with federal emergency management agency requirements and the City of Temple drainage criteria. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Council, questions for Mr. Newman? Thank you, sir. This item requires a public hearing, and if there are no questions from council or comments from staff, I'll declare the public hearing open. Anyone wishing to speak to the council on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Mr. Brett, come on forward. Oh, okay, all right.
Hey, Mayor, council members. Name's Troy Glasson, Temple Area Builders Association. Good evening to you. I just wanted to come up here and affirm what Mr. Newman just said. He was gracious enough to come and visit with our Government Affairs Committee and explain the significance of this update, and I would ask for your favorable consideration of passage of the update of this ordinance. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak?
My name is Travis Brett. I live at 102 East Shell Avenue. Williamson Springs goes through my property. I want to know what authorization that they have had over the years to continue to allow the building an industrial park and other locations that has eroded my property from about 8 foot to 50 feet wide washout. From the city side, it's only about 6 feet. On my side, it's about 50 feet. You tell me why the flood control, if somebody hadn't taken some action over these years, because this isn't the first time I've been here saying something about it. They put rock in there a while back. It's worse now since they put the rock in it was before they put it in. So they're going to have to take all that rock out and do something else. Because I'm getting tired as an individual citizen having my stuff eroded from the votes from planning commissions, from city commissions over the years that has caused this problem to take place, and nothing has been done to take care of it. So it's about time you do something to take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brett. Staff's it. Mr. Blackburn, is that something we've got under review at the present time?
I think we've had ongoing discussions with Mr. Brett. I mean, I know that staff has, just in the past 2 or 3 years that I've been here, I know that we've been having discussions with him and trying to resolve some of the issues, both with some work that's been done on the property. I think the brick wall and the bags that he's talking about has been a fairly recent occurrence over the course. But yes, we'll continue the discussions and see if we can assist.
Okay. Anyone else wish to comment or speak at this time? Seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on the first reading of the repeal and replacement of Chapter 13, the Flood Damage Prevention Ordinance of the City of Temple.
Motion to approve.
Second. We have a motion and a second to repeal and replace the ordinance. Is there further discussion? Being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter?
Aye.
Councilmember Jansen?
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna?
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider?
Aye.
Mayor Jones?
Aye. Item 10 is a first reading and a public hearing to consider adopting an ordinance renaming a portion of the planned outer loop, new portion of Old Howard Road and the portion from McLean Parkway through the Bioscience Park to FM 2305 and rename that as Research Parkway. Mr. Dole.
Mayor and City Council, the first reading that you have in front of you this evening, when you look at the Part 4 of your ordinance, if it's approved on your second reading July 17th, it would actually take effect 30 days afterwards to be able to allow street signs and mapping to be updated for those two areas. This map shows the area either from 2305 north or McLean Parkway south to 2305 for that portion of the road to be renamed Research Parkway. Both the RZ Board recommended at their most recent meeting to request the name change. This name change doesn't conflict with any other road inside our city limits, and the policy that was approved back in 2002 allows for the name change when it's in the best interest of the community. The letter that's a part of your packet this evening shows that the Economic Development Commission requested the RZ to be able to change the name to be able to help facilitate development in the Bioscience Park and surrounding area. I'd be glad to answer any questions that the council has, and this is a public hearing.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Dolan. Council, questions? Staff comments prior to going into public hearing? There being none, this item requires a public hearing. I'll declare the public hearing open at this time. Anyone wishing to speak to the council on this item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record, please, prior to making your comment.
My name is Loretta Grisham, and I do live on 2415 Old Howard Road, and I would like it to remain Old Howard Road. I've lived there my entire life, so has my family, for the majority of their life. I think that Old Howard Road has had a lot of changes, about all it can stomach for a little while. It needs to calm down just a little while. You know, we have a new road, we have a big sign, we have street lights, irrigation system that needs a little attention. It leaks in one place and it doesn't work in front of our house anymore, but that's okay. We can live with brown grass. Also, the land between Old Howard Road and the new detention pond that seems to get attention. has never been maintained since y'all have taken over. So, just FYI, y'all are wanting this to be a very eye-pleasing place out there, we can tell, because y'all have done a lot of work out there, and it looks nice. Not a lot of complaints out there. We do have to go north to go south, which is probably about an extra half mile for $1 a gallon gas. That's real good, but we can live with that too. But I think that it still needs to remain Old Howard Road. I believe that years ago it was named Old Howard Road because there was a community up on top of the hill there that was called Old Howard Community because that was a schoolhouse. That house on the top of the hill was a schoolhouse, and that's where my grandmother went to school years and years ago. But I also think that I just happened to be here to listen at the other issue that I'm sure y'all know concerns us. But, you know, I didn't know y'all were going to talk about this today. I don't always get to look at the newspaper daily. I do wind up looking at it, but it may be 2 or 3 days later. But I think that all the people that this affects, and it's going to affect more than just the Grishams, probably, should have been notified so they could come up and speak their piece. And maybe Mr. Jeter could come out and talk to the neighborhood and see how we feel. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grisham. Thank you for bringing those items to our attention. Anyone else wish to speak at this time? Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Council, your pleasure on item 10, renaming of the road is formally indicated.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for the approval of the name change to Research Parkway. This is the approval of the first reading. Is there further discussion or questions? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansen.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Aye.
Mayor, there will be a second reading on this item.
There will. It'll
So
be
Mrs. Grisham understands there is a second reading on this item for the final vote on that, so.
I heard that one.
So
Are y'all going to notify all the citizens so they can speak their piece if they...
Yeah, is there a notification process on an item like this, Mr. Dolan?
No, sir.
Okay. Just what's
I mean, there's a lot of
just
stuff
what's in the
that
paper.
entails if your address changes. I mean, you've got to change the whole life history, basically.
Yeah, just what's online or on the website, or if they happen to see it in the paper. Basically, is the way they would know about it. Okay.
Can you put it on the city channel as well? Because some people don't get the newspaper.
That's a good question. I don't know what's the answer.
can we do a second, some additional ad of some sort?
It is not on the city
Notify
city
folks or
TV.
something, I don't know. If there's anything else we don't
Do
television.
any ads of any kind.
The council meeting is, but the agenda is not.
We'll address that issue next week. See what we can do to do any notification. Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is item 11. This particular item, subsequent to this item coming before us, I'm going to have to not participate in this one. I'm going to turn the meeting over to Mayor Pro Tem Luna to run item number 11 as this company that is proposed to be awarded the bid approached a firm that I have a significant interest in and is potentially going to buy material and services from us. So, Ms. Luna, item 11.
Item 11 is to consider adopting a resolution authorizing a construction contract with James Construction Group, LLC of Belton for construction activities required to build the industrial rail spur phases 1 and 2 between Northwest HK Dodgen Loop and the future outer loop in an amount not to exceed $9,140,115 and declaring an official intent to reimburse the portion of this contract related to Phase 1 of the construction of the industrial rail spur funded with certificates of obligation bonds in the amount not to exceed $1,890,000 prior to the issuance of tax-exempt obligations designated for that portion of the project. Mr. Newman.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. This item is to award a construction contract for the industrial rail park. There have been at least 5 prior council actions on this item, and those are enumerated in the agenda item. The improvements are part of the Gulf States agreement with the City of Temple. This is a large, significant portion of that agreement. The amount of rail park infrastructure is about 22,000 linear feet of rail with associated crossovers, turnouts, switches, and culverts. There's another interest in this particular project. The city has previously agreed to contribute $5 million towards the construction of the northwest portions of the Loop 363 with TxDOT, and in turn TxDOT, through their Transportation Commission, authorized $20 million towards construction. That was to eliminate portions of the BNSF spur track where it currently crosses the North Loop, and that's been discussed before. The city, by assuming the responsibility of removing and relocating the BNSF spur track and purchasing the necessary property in association with this construction contract, the TxDOT in return has allowed us to reduce our $5 million requirement to $2 million. The schedule for construction is 365 days, 1 year. There were a number of bids that were received, and the high and the low range from approximately $9.1 million on the base bid to $10.2 million on the high bid. There's been one development that I need to interject here, and that's that the ad alternate number 1 of about $414,000 is also being recommended tonight. So we're going to have to revise the recommendation statement to include both the base bid and the alternate bid, and I think that total amount is $9,554,955. We also have recommendations from the reinvestment board on this, on acting on this, from our design consultant Casper Patrick and Associates and the city staff. And so collectively, we recommend the council's favorable consideration of this item.
Tell me the amount again.
Did I get that right, Tracy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the total amount of award for this contract, construction contract, would be $9,554,955.
Okay, and I just want to ask you, you mentioned Gulf States Toyota. The potential here will benefit many other businesses. I just want to report they're not the only business that will benefit here.
Right.
Any questions for Mr. Newman? Thank you.
Thank you.
What is your pleasure, council?
Mayor Pro Tem, I move that we approve the item, the base bid and the ad alternate for the total of $9,564,965.
54. I'm sorry.
$9,564,965.
$9,554,955.
Okay.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
Councilmember
Madam
Jeter.
Secretary.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Abstain. Item 12 is to consider adopting a resolution authorizing a construction contract with Ranger Excavating LP of Austin for construction activities required to build the rail park detention pond and underground stormwater conveyance system between Northwest HK Dodgen Loop and the future outer loop in the amount not to exceed $3,201,991. Mr. Newman?
Good evening, Mayor, Council. This is the companion to the previous item that y'all acted on. This is the detention pond to serve the Gulf States Toyotas almost 300 acre site that they're going to be developing up there. And there were at least two previous council actions that are also expounded on in the agenda item. The improvements, again, are part of the infrastructure improvements that were required by the Gulf States Agreement with the City of Temple, and the amount of work will consist approximately of 375,000 cubic yards of detention pond excavation with about 1,600 linear foot of reinforced concrete box culvert and then 108 linear feet of reinforced concrete pipe. The construction time for this project is 300 days, and there were a total of 11 bids received, and they range between approximately $3.2 million up to $6.0 million. This particular item, Gulf States has agreed to pay 50% of the costs for the bid items associated with underground storm water conveyance, which is an amount of $796,590. Okay. We also received recommendations from the Reinvestment Zone Board for this approval, and also from our consultant KPA, and also city staff. So we request your favorable consideration of this item.
Thank you, Mr. Newman. Council, any questions for Mr. There being none, entertain a motion for action on item 12, approval of this contract.
I move we approve this item as presented.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second for approval of the resolution authorizing the construction contract with Ranger Excavating. No further discussion, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider.
Abstain.
Mayor Jones.
Aye. Item 13 is to consider adopting a resolution appointing one member to the Airport Advisory Board to fill an unexpired term through September 1st of 2008. We have a couple of individuals to consider if it's the council's desire to fill this position. And again, this position actually runs through September 1st of 2008, just under a couple of months. So entertain a motion from council if there's one desired.
I move that we postpone action on this item until after September 1st.
Until the appointments of September
Right.
1st.
Until
That
that's right.
action actually would probably come forward in August for those appointments. So okay, we have a motion to merely table this appointment till the regular set of appointments that would be done next in August for this September 1st appointment. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, Madam Secretary.
Councilmember Jeter.
Aye.
Councilmember Jansak.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Luna.
Aye.
Councilmember Schneider.
Aye.
Mayor Jones.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this evening's council meeting. Thank you for your attendance, your participation. Have a great July weekend, and be safe. Good night.